Zorgamazoo, chapter 6. And remember, the main thing in chapter 5 that happened was that they had that drawing where they won the prize. You know, it's not really a prize. He has to go, remember that machine? I thought that was really cute. He has to go find those missing Zorgals from Zorgamazoo. And they gave him a map and some other stuff. So that's the main thing. And his, remember that he woke up, his pop was really excited. And so they hugged one another especially tight, and Morty set off that very same night. So that's what happened. So, the gang of McCrook. In the surface above, in the world that you know, Katrina Cottrell was a girl on the go. But where was she headed? She hadn't a clue. She had just to keep going. It was all that she knew. Yet a terrible rain was flooding the streets, falling in thundering, merciless sheets. Katrina was soaked. She was practically drowned. But she had to escape. She couldn't be found. For Mrs. Carabone was hot on her trail, tracking her down by tooth and by nail, with her that lunatic Dr. LaFang, who would mince up her mind into lemon meringue. What she needed was shelter, some haven or place to escape from the chill and the rain and the chase. It was then that she spotted a place she could hide at the end of an alley off to the side, a hatch in the wall that might be a door, or an entrance that wasn't in use anymore. On the wall near the hatch was a kind of a sign. It was hung on the brick with some raggedy twine. The words on the placard were sloppy and wild, as if scrawled by the hand of an ignorant child. Yet this was a sign that was meant to be read, and these were the words that it messily said. Hey you, that's right, you, whoever you are, from down on the corner or countries afar, we don't give a fig about who you might be, so leave us alone and go leap in the sea. And then if you still have a second to spare, then you might as well drown for all that we care. 'Cause to us you're a dog and you're way off your leash. So beat it, okay? Skedaddle, capiche? And you want to come in? You still want to come in? Well, you're badly mistook, 'cause you don't want to mess with the gang of McCrook. And it's all spelled wrong and stuff. The alley, however, was terribly dim. The rain was so thick you could go for a swim. The wind was a billowy, blustery gust, and the placard was grubby and covered with rust. So Katrina, of course, didn't notice the sign. She assumed that the doorway was perfectly fine. She splashed to the handle and waggled the latch, and to her surprise, that opened the hatch. Inside was a ladder with rungs in a row, a stairway of steps to a chamber below. But the stairway was crooked, the ladder was cracked, on the verge of collapse, as a matter of fact. Descending the stairway, its pilasters shook. They wobbled and quaked like a fish on a hook. At the bottom, the walls were discolored and bare, and shadows like spirits were haunting the air. Looking around, Katrina could see a booth where you once put a ticketing fee, some rusty old tracks for an underground train, and maps from the past to explain the terrain. Seeing it all, she could fairly deduce this was a station no longer in use. At this point, Katrina was terribly bushed. She couldn't go on, even if she were pushed. She needed a dwelling for resting her head, a comfortable place she could set for a bed. After some searching, she spotted a room that wasn't too buried in rubbish and gloom. She lay on the floor on a pillow of stone, feeling wretched, dejected, completely alone. But just as she readied herself for a doze, just as her eyes were beginning to close, just as she started to slumber and snooze, she was jolted awake by a thumping of shoes. Well, well, came a voice like the squeal of a saw. It looks like some joker has broken the law. Perhaps not a certified law of the land, but for sure it's the only law we understand. Now, what sort of law am I talking about? The law that says everyone better keep out. Katrina looked up from her place in the scruffs. She was concerned she was cornered, she saw, by a trio of toughs, 2 boys and a girl who were older than she, a dirty, despicable criminal 3. The girl was in gumboots, as tall as a chair. She had daggers and knives pinned up in her hair. Her name on the street was Selina the Slash, and she'd cut off your pants to pilfer your cash. To her left was an impish and rascally scamp, dressed in the rags of a traveling tramp. His nickname was Slicky, or Slicky Van Puke, and his nose always trickled with gobbledygook. Ugh. The last was a ruffian, lofty and tall, as strong as an ox and as wide as a wall, with a look on his face so purple and mean, like a face you might make in a stinking latrine. Katrina concluded with only a look, this last was none other than Bugsy McCrook. Now the gang of McCrook was a miserable mob, for whom robbing you blind was an everyday job. They were known for their violence and criminal feats, for a seedy selection of sinful deceits, from robbery, arson, and pyramid schemes to snatching the mascots from basketball teams. They had once robbed a pet shop of all of its cash, and they never, not ever, recycled their trash. I know who you are, Katrina exclaimed. You're Bugsy McCrook, and you should be ashamed. At your service, said Bugsy. He bent in a bow. I wonder, my dear, what shall we do now? I know, said the girl in the cumbersome boots. Let's force feed her full of some festering fruits. We can sting her with bees as much as we please. We can scrape up her knees with a grater of cheese. We can jab her with sticks, and if she survives, that's fine. Then we'll stick her with one of my knives. Sickly agreed with an insidious glee. You're a genius, Selina. That's easy to see. She must have been blind, ignoring our sign. We'll force her to whinny and whimper and whine. Wait, said Katrina. Hold on for a sec. Before you go crazy, start wringing my neck. Before you begin to dissever and maim. Hold on. At least let me tell you my name. All right, Bugsy sneered. But get on with it, see? Then you'll get your shellacking, and you'll get it from me. Katrina raised up her adorable head. She smiled like an angel, and here's what she said. They call me Katrina Cottrell, and I hope you all fall down a bottomless well. Then, like a cat, she sprung to her feet. She spun on her heels to beat a retreat. As she scuttled away, she was granted a chance to give Sickly a kick in the seat of his pants. Selina, she tripped with a flick of her foot, which made her go sprawling in rubble and soot, and then at the steps before her escape, she was captured by someone as strong as an ape. It was Bugsy McCrook. He was already there. He hoisted her up by a handful of hair. Katrina looked back at her turbulent wake. Selina lay sprawled like a slumbering snake. Her boots were askew and her hair was a mess. There were tatters and tears in her leathery dress. Sickly, meanwhile, was especially glum. He was sulky and sourly rubbing his bum. Okay, Bugsy puffed. We're skipping the bees. You can nix all the sticks and the grater of cheese. Instead, I've decided to skip to the punch. Let's finish her off. Get down to the crunch. Ms. Katrina Cottrell, say goodbye to your life, 'cause now, as we see it, it is the time for the knife. Selina provided her terrible blade. It flashed like the games in a penny arcade. She gave it to Bugsy, who grinned like a shark, whose teeth were a gleam in the shadowy dark. But before he could act on his odious goals, before he could riddle Katrina with holes, he was stopped by a voice that rose from the gloom and suddenly rippled all over the room. The voice started whistling a musical tune like a wolf as it croons at the sight of the moon. While howling a jingle and clapping a beat, the whisperer was No, the whistler was happily tapping his feet. The tapping grew louder just off to the right, and then Mortimer Yorgol tripped into the light. "Excuse me," he coughed. "I got carried away. It happens sometimes. Hey, what can I say?" Bugsy looked frightened, or startled at least, as he gaped at this creature, this blundering beast. "Hello," Morty waved. "I don't mean to intrude. I hope you'll excuse me for being so rude, but I got myself lost," he said with remorse. "I don't know where I am. I'm a little off course." Bugsy said nothing. He just ogled and stared. The pig-headed bully was actually scared. His lips began trembling. He started to pout. He tried saying something, but nothing came out. Nothing except for a meaningless peep, the tiniest, teeniest, whiniest eep. The knife in his hand, it fell to the floor, and Bugsy McCrook ran off for the door. His minions Selena and sickly Van Puke, whose nose was now gushing with gobbledygook, they were equally scared. They ran away too. Up the stairwell they scampered. They practically flew. So Katrina was left alone with this thing, not knowing what dangers their meeting would bring. But running away, well, it didn't seem right after Morty had proved himself rather polite. So she put out her hand. It hung there a while. On her face was a grateful but timorous smile. "My name's Katrina, and I'd just like to say thank you for going so out of your way. Those ruffians sure had me under the knife, so I owe it to you for saving my life." Morty reached out with the palm of his paw. They shook, and Katrina was stricken with awe. "Who, me?" Morty asked. "You got me all wrong. I was just passing through, just humming a song." His hand and his fingers were far from the norm. They were furry and roughened and toughened and warm. "Pleased to meet you," he said. "I'm Morty, or Mort. To be honest, I'm not the adventuring sort, but they sent me, it seems, on a sort of a quest, and I've got myself lost, and I'm sort of depressed. And there's no one to help me," he said with a sigh, as he awkwardly straightened the knot of his tie. The tie, thought Katrina. It was perfectly plain. It was him, the same face she had seen on the train. "You're the thing that I saw." She let out a squeal. "I can hardly believe that you're actually real." Morty looked at Katrina. He furrowed his brow. "Oh yeah, on the train. I remember you now." That's how it began, as simple as that. Soon they were chatting and chewing the fat, and Katrina could see in Mortimer's eye that here was a decent and likable guy. They spoke of their lives above and below, recounting their personal stories of woe. Katrina endeavored to try and explain the insidious perils besetting her brain. How Mrs. Cabron had commissioned a quack to pry at her skull with a crick and a crack. Morty, meanwhile, he spoke of his quest, his lottery ticket, and all of the rest. He mentioned his pop, who was sick as a dog, who sagged in his bed like a moldering log. But mostly he griped about being picked, how to him it appeared as if he'd been tricked. "What a joke," he lamented. "I haven't a clue how to find any Zorgals in Zorgamazoo." As she listened, Katrina was greatly engrossed. This tale had the stuff she admired the most, a potential adventure with thrill after thrill. She soaked it all up. She was utterly still. But her belly had butterflies flitting inside. Her breathing had quickened. Her eyes had gone wide. She felt like her body was lit from within. On her face was the subtlest hint of a grin. And so it was then that Katrina Cottrell decided to have an adventure as well. "Listen," she said, "I don't mean to pry, but I'd sure like to give an adventure a try. I always wanted to travel, to ramble and roam, but old Crabby won't let me. She keeps me at home. So this is my chance. I'm off on my own. I can travel the world, explore the unknown." Morty thought for a moment. He paced in a loop. He went moping around in a sort of a stoop. "Wait a second," he said. "Are you actually sure? If you join me, who knows what we'll have to endure?" "Of course," said Katrina. "I could give you a hand. I could help you to make it to Zorgamaland. I'm good with a map, and I'm quick on my feet. Who knows? Perhaps we were destined to meet." Morty chuckled and smiled. Okay, you can stop. You know, you remind me a bit of my pop. He's nothing like me. He's all gusty like you. Gutsy like you. Oh, and one other thing. It's Zorgamazoo. Fair enough, said Katrina. Now hand me the map, which he did, and she opened it up in her lap. Oh my gosh, look at it. Every inch of the paper was covered with roads, with passages, tunnels, and curious codes. It seemed to be utterly puzzling at first. In no time, Katrina was deeply immersed. Then, all at once, it seemed to make sense, despite being so incredibly dense. I've got it, she said. It's all coming clear. There should be a doorway right over here. She pointed across to a cleft in the wall, a gap that was hardly a doorway at all. It led to a tunnel, forbidding and dark, the path onto which they were set to embark. As they vanished inside and into the black, Katrina knew then there was no turning back. Dun, dun, dun. So they're together on the quest.